we sort of, so they ran it like a lab.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was like, you made a research team for each week, for that entire class that you stuck with for the entire semester. So for 1/3 of the semester, we worked on the eye from a horseshoe crab, like a single eye, and we drill and extract it and then record from the retina. And then so there were 3 of us in a team, and we had 3 projects. One was recording from the ear cell of a rat, one was from the horseshoe crab, and the other was from a single crawfish neuron, single cell recording from a crawfish neuron. So each of us were like the primary investigator on one of those. And we'd write up the entire manuscript from start to finish. And of course, the third one was much better than the first one, because that's how you learn. But it was a really interesting process, and that's what, like, after I took that class, I was like, you know what, I think grad school is something that I can do, because this, like, I enjoy this process.
Very cool. So of course, you also went in thinking that pre-med and being a practicing doctor could be something. And I always felt that, yeah, Tanvi definitely looks like one of those people who has the empathy, who really is smart, can be a great doctor. So how do those decisions pan out eventually for you, since you chose to become a researcher? A PhD track is very different from a medicine track.
Yes. And so it actually started out as like, you go, you enter college and you're a pre-med, and like about 60% of the biology majors are pre-med, and everybody's like, to get into a good med school, like you have to do research, it has to be something that you have to get on your CV and blah, blah. So like overly enthusiastic, freshman that I was like writing to professors, can I come and work in your lab? Of course, I don't know how to do anything. And so I got actually really lucky. And I ended up working with somebody called Dr. Eric Herzog. And right, I think at the end of the spring semester as a freshman, I started working with him. And then that first summer, I came back to work in the lab. And I just had a great time. But I think up until like maybe a year and a half after that also, I was like, I'm doing this so that I can go to med school. Like this is something that's going on my resume kind of thing, And then I was just talking to another grad student in the lab, and I was like, this is a great job, and he's so great, and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, okay, so what do you want to do with your life? And I said, go to medical school. And they were like, why? I thought you just said you enjoyed this. And then I was like, why? And I was like, wait, this is a great job. And by then I'd also shadowed some doctors, and while I have enormous appreciation for what they do, I realized that I was more interested in science and being able to test things and being able to have answers. And that just, the approach to science appealed to me. And so I stuck with it. I was like, oh, this is fun.
And then you obviously continued your interest in neuroscience.
Yeah. And so Herzog runs a neuroscience lab. And then I was an author on a paper out of his lab. And then it just went from there.
Interesting. So let's switch gears and talk about, generally WashU and the quality of life at the city and St. Louis, and of course, neighboring areas. What are the myths about living in the Midwest, in a very big city in the Midwest? What is the reality, or the good and the bad that comes with it?
You won't ever find really good sushi. That was the big downside. But I feel like people have a lot to say about St. Louis. Like, are there disadvantages to living in St. Louis? Yes, there is. For example, there's no direct flight to India. I'd always fly to New York and fly there. And people who are living, in San Francisco or New York have the advantage of, slightly more convenience. But I actually really, really love living in St. Louis. I visit still whenever I can, because WashU and St. Louis and WashU, Northwestern, a lot of these campuses, they're campuses that are close to cities, but they're still a campus. So it's almost like a gated community. There's a huge sense of security and comfort. I mean, WashU is gorgeous. If you've never been, it's, really a very pretty campus. And the city of St. Louis and WashU kind of support each other a lot. So, as a student in the city, you have advantages of hockey games. They recently won the Stanley Cup, and baseball games, and WashU subsidizes all of that, and they have like the largest urban park in the US, and like right at your door, and so there's big advantages to living in a Midwestern city where people are nice. There's not as much traffic. There are some disadvantages, like public transport isn't as good as it would be in, say, Manhattan. Less rats though. But so I think overall it's one of those really underrated cities to live in, and I think it's definitely, like, anybody who's considering WashU, visit it, and I think you'll have a really, really difficult time turning it down.
Well said, well said. How did you get involved socially on campus life? I know you became a resident assistant or something.
Advisor, yeah.
Advisor. But before that, like which clubs and what is it that you really did for fun?
So freshman year, I was not involved in as many clubs per se, because our floor community was really great and really tight. And I realized that, clubs are often a way for people to reach out and make friends and stuff. But we just ended up hanging out in the hallway so much that I never ended up, regularly attending other clubs. But later on, I got involved with like a decent number of volunteer organizations. I was helping teach young kids. I was helping tutor other chemistry students after I'd taken chem my freshman year. So sophomore year, I got involved in those mentoring jobs. Socially, there was like an Indian students community. I'd hang out with those guys. And then I don't know how it happened, but my social group just happened to involve people who were working with different organizations. So it's like, oh, my friend is doing this, I'll join that. So, I ended up like spearheading this thing called Locks for Love, which, donated hair to cancer patients or something, different ages of cancer patients. And I did that for, I think for 3 years. So it just, it was something that happened organically. I didn't end up joining a whole bunch of different clubs. So I was, a part of PLTL, and I was a part of Locks for Love and a bunch of service communities, but I didn't do, I wasn't part of a dance club.
Wonderful.